Okay, so I want to look tonight at kind of a contrast between two men in the Bible. And actually, we might get into more than two men, but just a contrast. And so we're going to start tonight with the wise one, the wise man. And our scripture base for that is Psalms 91, 1 and 2. It says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him I will trust." So this is the picture, really, to me, of a man who has just placed himself in the complete care and trust of God. He wholeheartedly just trusts in the Lord. He knows that God is going to take care of him no matter what comes along. He is rest assured that God is going to take care of them. So with that thought in mind, now these you're going to have this study tonight. You're really going to have to think. Put on your thinking caps and be ready to jump in here. But so thinking about that, a man who has put his complete trust and care in God. Can anybody think of another psalm that this reminds them of? So I'll give you a second to think about that. It's a psalm that we're all really familiar with, but it talks about the complete trust and, dwelling in God. And while you're thinking that, I'll let Steve in here. Okay, so let me give you a hint. If anybody needs a hint, let me give you a hint here. Okay, so this picture should give you a clue.
Psalm 1.
Yes, absolutely. That's right. Psalms 1 through 3, that talks about, being like that tree that's planted by the living waters, that brings forth its fruit in its season,
You guys could probably sit in.
His leaf doesn't wither, whatever he does prospers or succeeds, So that really, if we're going to be that man that puts his whole trust in God, we've got to have those roots deep, don't we? We've got to be able to have them deep enough that we can drink of the living water and let that nourishment flow up through our lives. Okay, so good job, Sierra. All right. So let's break this down just a little bit. So it talks about our opening scripture, he who dwells. And if you think about dwelling, think about to sit or to remain, or to stay.
You know what? I'm gonna go get it. I'm gonna go get it. I gotta get it charged.
Hang on a second. Okay, now. So if you think about, to sit in the Lord, or to remain in the Lord, or to stay in the Lord. Now that doesn't mean that we're to remain stagnant or lazy. In fact, if we're that way, if we just sit down in the Lord, so to speak, or remain stagnant in the Lord, that really has some serious consequences. So if somebody has their Bible, then why don't we look up Proverbs 24 and read verses 30 through 34 for us. And whenever you got it, say, I got it, and just jump in.
I got it.
Go for it.
Okay. It says, I walked by the field of a lazy person, the vineyard of one with no common sense. I saw that it was overgrown with nettles, it was covered with weeds, and its walls were broken down. Then as I looked and thought about it, I learned this lesson. A little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber.
Yeah, okay. And I'm we're going to do a study in the future on those particular scriptures. But think about that. If we get lazy in the Lord, or we sit down, so to speak, and we don't do anything to grow. We've talked a lot about growing and what it takes and intentionality, but if we don't, the enemy comes in, doesn't he? And he allows our life to get overgrown with thorns and the nettles and all that stuff that Sierra read about. So when we talk about dwelling, we don't mean to sit down and not do anything, but we do mean, to stay. Let's see here. Strong's Concordance has that word dwell as a verb. And I found that interesting. So it's a verb. So think about that. And how can you apply that? Maybe I already answered this question, but how can you apply that to your spiritual life if that dwelling is a verb?
The other scripture that comes to mind is when Jesus talks about being the vine and that we're to abide in him.
Okay, good. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. So what's that? So elaborate on that a little bit. What do you mean by abide, or what did he mean by abide?
To me, it's an active being present with him, but also like, I know I kind of picture like the tree with the roots reaching down. We're not just sitting there, we're like reaching. And it's the same with when you're a vine or you're a branch on a vine, you're, kind of reaching for the nutrients.
Yeah, good. So you have some participation involved. Yeah, good. I like it. Okay. Let's see, Psalms 37 and 23. So those say the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Okay, so this, I'm going to read that again. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Now notice, or you can't see it, but I can, that he is capitalized. Okay, he delights in his way, and his is not capitalized. So God delights in the way of a good man because he orders his steps. All right, so I wanted to think just for a moment here before we move on about steps. And steps really imply movement, not stagnation. They imply movement and hopefully forward. How many of us, if we're honest, have taken steps backwards in our walk with the Lord? We got to be honest here. Okay. But steps do imply movement or moving forward or making progress. And one of the things that I've learned in my life is that when I'm making progress, I'm happy. When I'm not making progress or I'm not doing anything spiritually, so to speak, I'm not happy. And I might even find myself going backwards. Does anybody else feel that way?
Definitely.
Yeah. I think it's common. I think it's part of our DNA, our human nature, that if we're making progress in something, it just creates happiness. It builds, it actually, builds that dopamine we talked about last week. And what's the other neurotransmitter? I just lost it.
Anna says serotonin.
Serotonin, that was what I was thinking of. Yep, thank you. So, progress, when we create, when we make things, when we do things, it builds those neurotransmitters, which lead to happiness. All right. So the big question here, is, are you moving forward? Are you dwelling, in the Lord, in the sense that it's a verb? Or are you just stagnant? Now we all get stagnant at times. That's just, I think, part of just who we are, part of the fall, maybe, part of our nature, that we do get stagnant at times. But I think that if we apply the verb part of dwell, that we're less likely to get stagnant because we're moving forward. Okay. All right. So with that thought in mind, let's look at steps. So can anybody think of a biblical example where somebody appeared like he was moving backwards in their life, but he was really moving forwards? Now, there could be more than one. I've got one kind of in mind. Let me let Amber in here. So think for a moment about some of the great characters in the Bible, and maybe one or two that you can think of that it just really looked like they were moving backwards, but in reality, they were moving forwards.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. When you said that, I thought of Jesus. And I'll explain that because to human eyes, the biggest step Jesus ever took was dying on the cross. And to human eyes, it looked like he was giving up everything. And I think even Satan, it looked like he was giving up absolutely everything, but it was the one step he needed to take forward to redeem mankind.
Wow, that is awesome. I never even thought about that. He never even crossed my mind. So awesome thought, Hannah. Thanks for sharing. I love it. Can anybody else think of somebody? You got to think hard here.
I thought of David when he was running from Saul. It looked like he had lost what was promised to him and is being anointed as king, but it was really setting him up for taking the kingdom.
That's a perfect one. Absolutely, yes, exactly. Anybody else? I've got a couple here I'll share, but
I got one, Kevin.
go for it.
How about Job?
Job?
Job.
Explain yourself.
What'd you say?
Explain that.
Well, it looked like he lost. Well, he literally lost everything, right?
Okay. Well, he did.
It looked like he still didn't give up. And out of that, he winds up getting 7 times more of everything because he wouldn't curse God and die, and he was still faithful, even though he didn't understand why he's going through what he's going through.
Good.
He winds up forward, even in the midst of his tragedy. Right.
And he winds up understanding God a lot better, didn't he?
True.
So yeah, so good example, Steve. I'm reading Job right now in my devotion. So good. What about this guy?
What about
go ahead.
What about Joseph?
Who?
Joseph.
Oh, that's who I just put on the screen. Yep. So explain what you think about Joseph as far as going backwards but really moving forward.
Well, Joseph knew he was special from the beginning, and he often boasted to his brothers, which ultimately cost him his freedom. So he went from being a favored child to slavery, and then he worked himself up from there to being head of a household, and then he gets thrown into jail.
Right.
And he works himself up there in prison, within prison walls, to find favor amongst the guards. But he still moves up, but he's in prison for 2 more years when he really thinks he's about to get out, and it's still 2 years before he does. So I feel like it's just back and forth for him a lot. But he ended up a very humble individual. So I guess God needed him to go through that journey to humble him. I personally hope that I can not have a severe lesson and get it, but maybe not.
No, that's a great example. That's one of the ones I thought of. He was in a pit, which looks like a backward step in a dungeon, and but he got promoted to number 2 in charge of all of Egypt, second in command. Now we kind of think about prison, no big deal, but I mean, look at this. This is actually, I found a picture of what it may have looked like. I mean, okay, so these weren't prison walls with windows looking outside and courtyards to exercise in, and TV. I mean, these were dungeons. These were dark. They were cold. They were not a friendly place.
And
So
they
that
weren't
really-
well lit like that either.
Right. Yeah, that's a light for the camera. Yeah, they would just have had a torch. And I mean, when that torch is out, you're in total darkness. In Psalms, I'm not going to take the time to read this, but Psalms 105, 17 and 22 actually talk about how, they hurt him with iron and with fetters. I mean, this wasn't like a casual time for Joseph. This was a very dark, depressing time. So it looked like he was moving backwards, but he really moved forwards, forward. And look how, it just amazes me, this whole story. I could talk about this for a long time, but how God just used all of that from the very beginning of Joseph being thrown in that pit, and just leading that into the whole story of Jacob and his 70 relatives going to Egypt to be saved from the famine, and then becoming a nation of over 2 million people, but becoming slaves. It just amazes me how God orchestrated all of that. Okay, let's see here. I was thinking of somebody else here. Oh, what about Moses? Moses, it looked like he took a step back. Will you tell me, somebody think about the story of Moses, the timeline of Moses's life, and how would it look like that he took a step back, but he really was moving forward?
Well, he started out in a basket in a river, ended up in a palace. Then he ended up fleeing and becoming a shepherd in the desert for
Right.
many years.
40, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Oh man, Moses has so many moments, because those are like 2 moments. And then when he goes to the children of Israel in Egypt, and Pharaoh makes their work harder. And
Right.
then after that, they escape, and then they get to the Red Sea, and God had that looks like they're behind, they're going backwards, and then he, saves them. And then when they disobey God and they have to go out through the wilderness another 40 years, Moses has a lot of backwards and forwards moments.
He does, yeah. But whenever looked like he was moving backwards, he really was moving forward. We're going to do a study of Moses too in the future, but just think about the things he learned in the palace and how he used those later on in his life. So yeah, great.
Brother Kevin,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, I think the Red Sea moment's probably one of the biggest ones out there, because if you think about it, if they look like they went they came to a place where they were stuck,
Yeah.
and it looked like they were doomed, and all of a sudden the Lord prepares the
Right.
way and parts the sea.
Yeah, it looked like they were bound for death, because here comes Pharaoh with 600 chariots, and he's going to kill them, So yeah, it would look pretty dire at that point, wouldn't it? So good example. Okay. All right. I think we'll move on from this one. Let me look at the chat real quick. Somebody has chatted in a couple of things.
Did we mention Peter?
We didn't mention Peter, but hey, Dwayne is with us tonight. Awesome. I just saw that chat, so good. I love it. Hi, Dwayne. Okay, so yeah, let's mention Peter then. Mike, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that all that he had seen and witnessed, and had been in the garden with Jesus, and they hauled him away, and he goes and backslides by denying Christ. Even though he'd professed, "I'll go to death for you," and then turns around. He easily could have walked away at that point. But Jesus ultimately restores him, and he became one of the greatest evangelists in the church, proclaiming, on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 souls were saved that day and added to the church. So,
Yeah. Yep. Good example. Yeah. I mean, look how God used Peter. I mean, you know, I've taught some good lessons and maybe done some good speeches or some sermons, but man, I've never had 3,000 people, you know? So yeah, that was awesome how God used him. But at one point, yeah, it looked pretty bad. So good. Anybody else before we move on?
Yeah, Brother Dwayne would like to make a comment.
Okay, let's hear it.
So my thought was prodigal son.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why I think of prodigal son is because mostly, you know, we're a lot like the prodigal son in a lot of cases where we try to run before the Lord, we try to do our own thing, and in the process we get away from God. But in the end, we come back, and it becomes a part of who we are. And actually, God uses that to better us as persons and in our ministry also.
Yeah, good example, good thought. Thank you for sharing. Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's go on here. When we talk about steps in the Lord, you know, let's think about Galatians 5:25. We're all familiar with that. You know, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So I really got to thinking about that, and I want to ask you a question. So if you're continually walking in the Spirit, moving forward, how can you still stay in the secret or the secure place of God's shadow? Remember at the very beginning, this man lived in the shadow of the Lord. You know, he trusted in him. How can you do that if you're continually walking?
You're walking with Jesus.
Well, wouldn't you outwalk that shadow that he has you under?
Not if you're following him.
Okay.
I picture it like how Moses and the children of Israel were following the cloud, the pillar of smoke and the fire at night. Because like if you read that, I've read it in the New Living Translation. Since we are living by the Spirit, let us follow the Spirit's leading in every part of our lives. And that's what they were doing, is they were following the Spirit's lead when they were following the cloud. And that I kind of picture that as a shadow, and like it's a sign of his presence. So
Okay. So move forward. Yeah. Okay. That's a good thought. That's good. But when we talk about walking in the Spirit, are we really talking about a natural walk like this guy that you see here? I don't think so. Aren't we talking about a lifestyle?
Yep.
Yeah. We're talking about more of a spiritual walk than a natural walk. Okay, so it talks about abiding in him. So we can't outwalk the Lord because it's a spiritual walk. It's something that we live, not that we physically do. Okay, so if we think about abiding under him, you know, what does it mean to abide in something? So we're walking in the Spirit, but yet we're still abiding in the Lord, abiding under him. What does it mean to abide in something? So the answer is in Galatians 5:25. If we what in the Spirit? Live. So what does it mean to abide in something? It means to
live in it.
Live in it. To live in it. To dwell. Exactly. Yeah, to dwell. You know, walking in a lifestyle of the Spirit is what will allow us to abide under the shadow of his wings, or to abide in him. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, everybody still with me? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's go back into our scripture here a little bit, talk about the refuge. You know, he said that the opening scriptures talked about, you know, you're my refuge and my fortress. All right. So let's dig into this a little bit. What do you think of when you hear the word refuge?
Safe place.
Strong tower.
Strong tower, a safe place. Okay. Anybody else? One of the things that it means is like a shelter, you know, a thicket, a lair, or a booth. So it's a place that you abide. It's a place of safety. Yes. It's also a place of peace. Okay, a place of rest. Now, let's see here. I don't want to get ahead of myself. A place of security. Okay. So in Psalms 27:5, it talks about, for in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion, in his refuge. In the secret place of his tabernacle, he shall hide me. He shall set me high up on a rock. So there's a place of safety there, that refuge, that shelter that provides peace, rest, security. Now think about this. Somebody read Matthew 7:24-28, if you can get that. Hopefully I can tie all this together. So Matthew 7:24-28. It's a familiar story to us.
Yeah, I got it. Matthew
Go for
7, 24-28, you said?
Yes.
Wherefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house. And it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house. And it fell, and great was the fall of it. And it came to pass, when Jesus had ended these sayings, the people were astonished at his doctrine.
Okay. So this man built the man built his house on the rock. It was a place of safety from the storm, security. It was a place of peace, right? Of rest. Okay. And if we live under the word, walk in the spirit, live under the word, then that will keep us in his refuge. It will keep us in that place of safety. All right. Now let's look at this. So this is a good, like, to go along with the scripture that Mike read. Okay. So a house that's built on that rock can withstand those storms. Nothing's going to destroy it. And I know that we have storms in our lives, and sometimes we tend to let those storms get the better of us. It's just the way we are sometimes. But if we're really in that rock, those storms may beat at its foundation, but it won't destroy it. Okay, that makes sense. So our house really should be a place of refuge. Okay, now, any thoughts before we move on? I'm going to talk about it being a fortress. Okay, I want to hurry a little bit here. All right. So let's think about a fortress. What comes to mind when you hear about a fortress? Because our opening scriptures talked about a refuge. God was a refuge and a fortress. So we know a refuge is a place to dwell. You know, it provides safety, security. You know, it can withstand the storms. But what comes to your mind? What picture do you see when you see or hear the word fortress?
Being inside a contained area,
Okay,
protected.
protected. Okay.
I picture a fortified defensive structure.
Hannah
Okay.
says Helm's Deep.
Hannah says what?
Helm's Deep.
Helm's
Exactly, Hannah.
So, yeah. So maybe something like this picture here, right? Yeah. Good job, Hannah. Yeah, I love it. Leave her to bring Lord of the Rings into it. Okay. All right. So if we think about a fortress being like this, what is the difference between a refuge and a fortress? There is something different.
Isn't a refuge protected?
protected from what?
The enemy.
Okay. Elaborate on that. Think about just elaborate on that thought, Ann.
Well, you're inside where you're nice and safe, and you got everybody around the ring fighting for you.
Right. Okay. So that fight is an analogy of what in your life?
Safety.
Safety. But when you're talking about the fight, the war, apply
Satan.
that to your life spiritually.
Well, the way Satan's always coming after us.
Okay, exactly. Aren't we in a war?
Yes.
We're in a spiritual battle every day. You know, we've talked about how the enemy last week, the enemy we talked is just, he's very organized, he's very structured, he's very strategic, and he's very smart. And his one agenda is to destroy us. We're in a war. So the difference between a refuge and a fortress is the fortress will provide us protection from the enemy. So maybe a refuge provides us protection from the storms of life, the place of safety. The fortress provides us protection from the attack of the enemy. If we look at, yeah, go ahead, somebody.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you're talking about the difference, and I see what you're saying. A kind of a different difference that comes to mind for me.
Okay.
I thought the refuge is where you're safe and you're good. But
Yeah.
the fortress is where you go in time of battle. So the refuge, somebody else is fighting for you, you're safe, there's peace there. But in the fortress, you're preparing for battle and you're the one going out to battle.
Okay. You know what? So you mean to tell me when I can't just sit down and let the Lord fight my battles for me?
Go ahead. Oh, you can still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought he muted it. You can, because it does, the Bible does talk about, the Lord goes before us, but he also talks about, that there are things we have to do. And like Joshua told his people to be strong and courageous, God expected the Israelites to march in and take Canaan. Even though he was going to give it into their hands, he expected them to get up and do something.
Right.
And there are times where we alternate between being in that refuge and God fighting the battles we can't fight, and him saying, it's time to go to war now.
Right. Exactly. We have a part. We're some of the fighters, aren't we?
Well, we're his hands and feet.
Yeah. But
He works through us.
He works through us. We're in a war, and when the enemy is attacking us, we have to fight. We can't just lay down and let him run over us. We can't just say, God, protect me, and not have any active part in the battle. I mean, we've got to have an active part in the battle, or guess what? We're going to be defeated. That's just the way it is, and we've all been there, I know. So that fortress is a place, though, where we go for battle, but it's a place of safety and protection from that battle. But yes, we are expected to fight. Absolutely. Psalms 59 and 19 talks about when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. And that's the Spirit of God that helps us fight the battle. It's the Spirit of God that gives us that strength, so okay, let's see. I guess we kind of covered this. When you're in a battle, you need a good fortress. Proverbs 18 and 10 says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. I like that. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. Helm's Deep, did it withstand the attack of the enemy, Hannah?
Yes. Well, until they blew it up, had to be rescued.
Right. Yeah. The enemy blew his way into it, you know. But if I guess my point here is if we're at war and we're, you know, in the fortress of the Lord, then and we're fighting, we're going to be victorious. You know, we will be victorious in the Lord. Okay.
If we're gonna take that Lord of the Rings example,
Yep.
going backwards to say the difference. So if Helm's Deep is the fortress, then Rivendell is the refuge, because
Right.
that's the place of healing and rest and where they recover.
I like that. I love it. That's a great thought. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Let's see here. I kind of had this picture I just threw in of a bee, you know, in a flower. And I was thinking about the enemy, you know, Psalms 118, 10 through 12. David wrote, all nations surrounded me, but in the name of the Lord, I will destroy them. They surrounded me. And doesn't it just seem like sometimes the enemy has surrounded you and he's buzzing about and he's stinging you at every opportunity? At least that's kind of the way it is for me, you know, but the fortress, you know, we can destroy him in the name of the Lord. That fortress that we run into helps protect us. So, okay, good thoughts, guys. Love it. Keep it up. All right, let me move on real quick here. My God, in him I will trust. I think we've talked a lot about this a little bit. You know, most of us are familiar with Proverbs 3 and 5 about trusting in the Lord. So I'm gonna skip some of this here a little bit. Okay, I want to move on to the foolish man, because we talked about the wise man, but I want to move on to the foolish man here. And if somebody could get Luke chapter 12 and read verses 15 through 22. It's another familiar story to us, but let's read it and apply that story to this topic.
Hannah has it.
Okay, go for it.
12, 15 through 22.
Yes, now speak up so we can hear you well.
Okay. And he said to them, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. Are we in the right spot? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully, and he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up his treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Then he said to his disciples, therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, nor about the body, what you will put on.
Okay, so I want to think about this man here. We call him a foolish man, but really, this guy was no dummy. I mean, he was a very successful businessman and farmer. You can't be an idiot and have a good farm. I mean, it says the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. So he was a smart guy. I mean, this was not a dummy, you know. But the enemy hit him exactly where he hits everybody, in his mind. He thought within himself, you know, he began to get lazy and trust in things. You know, he thought within himself, you know, man, I've done all of this. Look at everything I have. I'm so great. I've done so many things, you know, I'm so proud. and he began to get lazy. He said to his, to himself, soul, you've got a lot of stuff. We're good for many years. Let's just take it easy. Let's eat, drink, and be merry. So if you think about that, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. As he thinks in his heart, so is he. So he was thinking in his heart, look how great I am. Look how big I am. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. He was thinking how wonderful he was. But what did Jesus say about this man? What did he call him? You got your scriptures open still, Hannah? He called him a fool. He said, you don't know what you're talking about, because this very night, your soul is going to be required of you. So though this man thought how great he was putting his trust in the wrong things. And we kind of see that today. Okay, so in Luke 16, 26 through 30, it talks about as in the days of Noah, it's going to be like as in the days of Noah, it's going to be like that when Jesus comes back. So don't we see that today? That the real problem is people putting their trust in the wrong things. They're, in the days of Noah, they're putting all their activity and everything about their life into worldly things and not even thinking about the things of God. And that's the contrast I really wanted to look at tonight, was the contrast between the man who has God as his refuge and his fortress and lives under the shadow of God, versus the foolish man who puts his trust in things and thinks to himself how great I am, instead of thinking about how great God is. Okay, does that make sense? All right. I'm hurrying here a little bit, I know, because I thought this would be a short lesson. Okay, I want to just look real quick as we wrap this up at another contrast. And it's found in Luke 16, 19 through 26. And what I'll do for sake of time is I'll tell you the story. And it's the story about the rich man who died and the beggar Lazarus. Everybody familiar with that story?
Yep.
Okay, probably, yeah. Okay, so it talks about the rich man died and what happened to him. Well, he was lost and he went to hell and he was in torments, and it talks about how Lazarus, the beggar, died and was carried in the arms of Abraham, or in the bosom of Abraham. And the rich man saw that, and remember his response, like, oh Lord, I just, if I could just go back. And of course that wasn't possible. Or, can you send somebody to my relatives and let them know that this is real? Of course that wasn't possible. What was the rich man's real problem that he had? Why was it that he was rich? Was the rich man's problem that he was rich? Is that why he went to hell?
That he trusted in his riches.
Right. He trusted in his riches, just like the man who built, the bigger and bigger barns. The rich man, it's okay to be rich. But it's what you put your trust in and what you put your security in. You put your security in the things of this world, you're going to be really disappointed. But did the poor man go to heaven just because he was poor?
Nope.
No. He went to, we go to heaven because we have that relationship with God. We're poor in spirit, so to speak, And so if we look at the lesson that we could learn from the man in Luke 12 that built the bigger and bigger barns, and the rich man in chapter 16, then we can realize that we can't put our trust in things here in this life of the world, We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Proverbs 27:1 says, don't boast about tomorrow, for you don't know what a day may bring forth. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. James 4:14 talks about how brief our life is, and I think we all could just realize how fast time has gone. Isn't it crazy? I mean, and it just seems like it goes faster and faster. Amber, I've seen you post things on Facebook about, oh, I wish my kids were, little again. You see those memories, and it goes so fast, and we never know when it's going to end for us. So anyway, I got to wrap it up here. There's a contrast between people here. And I just want to throw out this question, what guy are you? Are you the guy that we started with in Psalms? Or are you the guy that builds his bigger and bigger barns and desires greater and greater things and puts his trust in what we have here on this life? You have to make that decision, but we just, we never know when our time is up and when we may be standing at those pearly gates. We just never know. And I've got a closing picture here to just show you what, it might be like at the pearly gates here. I got to bring this Far Side cartoon into it somewhere, Colonel Sanders standing at the pearly gates. So anyway. Okay. I love Gary Larson. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other thoughts? Any other ideas before I wrap this up?
No, it was good.
Okay, I'll take that as a no. Okay, thank you. I am going to go ahead then, and I'm going to stop the recording, and we will wrap it up.